This is a video response to A Dark Age of, once known as RollPlayGame. That's right. So if you were a former subscriber to Jason, A Dark Age of, well, he's back and making a lot of videos, mostly about OSR or D&D 5th edition, but who knows where he'll go in the future. And it's been great to see him making these videos. And yesterday I watched one called Why Do I Homebrew Every Game That I Play? Or something like that. And it made me laugh and made me feel a lot of empathy. So I thought I'd make this video response out of a sense of solidarity. I don't think I have any answers for him, but I do have some stories and my own personal experience with that question. And who knows, maybe it'll help. But anyway, as a sense of welcome back, I'm glad you started making videos again. Here's this video response. So, why do I homebrew every game that I play? In his video, which I'll link below, he describes both sides of the situation. Right? So go watch that video and get a sense of what I'm talking about. Why do I feel the need to add to, subtract from, adjust the rules of the games that I play? And why have I always done that? And is this something I should do? Is it wrong to do that? Or is it time to move on? You know, there's discussions online and everywhere and videos that I have myself where we come out and say, if you have to make significant adjustments to this game is probably not for you. You know, why waste your time wrestling with it? And also why create problems of making your table accessible to new gamers if you say, well, we're playing this, but this change and this change and this change and this, you know. There's a certain logic to that. Why not just play rules as written? But playing rules as written isn't as easy as it sounds. Right? There's a adjustment period. There's a long learning curve involved in picking up a new game and playing it exactly as written. Right? And I find the people who are best at it are ones who come from not that point of view. Right? The ones who grew up having to make rulings, adjustments, additions, subtractions, right? Who had to deal with conflicting rules or rules that nobody liked, or had to create on the fly rules that didn't exist. I find these people are best able to adapt to an environment where they know there's a rule for something. They can't remember what it is, but they have a sense of how the system works, and they draw on their experience, and they make a ruling. And then later on, they can sort out what the real rule is. And half the time, they find out that the ruling that they made is the actual rule. So, it's a progression through life. And I think it could be highlighted by this particular story. When the RPG Stack Exchange started, there were a lot of questions that brought up stuff like this. And if you don't know, the RPG Stack Exchange is a player resource, a role-playing gamer resource. It's not a forum, right? It's not a community. It has a community in a separate section, but its main face is it's a question and answer site. So you do your best to create a useful question about a game. And people who have played that game and have experience with that game do their best to create useful answers to that question, and then they can be voted up or voted down. And the questions can be voted up and voted down. So, it's an incredible resource for learning a game. You get to see questions that people think are really good questions about that system because they've been voted up, they're easy to find, and the best answer to that question is there, as well as some apocryphal or anecdotal other upvoted responses. And you'll also see ones which people have voted down because they're not relevant or not good answers or not good solutions to that problem. So I kind of like this site more than I enjoy going to forums or things like that. So one of these questions that I saw was about Palladium Fantasy. And this is from a player, you got a feeling that they were younger because they were saying, how do you do perception checks in this game? Meaning they had experience playing games and those games had perception checks in them, but then they decided to play Palladium Fantasy, and they're looking and looking for the rule that they know has to be there because it's in every other game that they've played, but it's not there. And is there an errata for this? Where do I find the perception rules? That kind of thing. So people start to answer, and the way that the culture is there, they answer the question, well, here's how you can do a perception check in Palladium. But, and then continue with their experience. But when these games were new, we didn't need perception checks. We handled perception in a completely different way. And they would explain how people would play by describing the investigation of a room. And this is great. Now, what does this story mean to me? Well, it means a whole bunch of things, actually. It means that the people who answered the question grew up having to make rulings, and that they now understand the impact and effect of rules. And it means that the person who asked the question didn't grow up in that environment. They didn't feel confident making a ruling, and they couldn't really interpret from the game itself how to handle that situation. Going a little deeper than that, it also shows us that you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Perception checks are out there. It's something that we're going to have to deal with forever. If you write a game that doesn't include them because you want people to roleplay, you're going to have to be very specific that in your perception section detailing how to go about adjudicating that fairly, because there's a lot of reason why perception checks were invented. Right? If we think about it, if the play group is investigating a murder mystery and they're only going to find clues by explicitly stating what they do to investigate that room, then if you have kind of a Monty Hall kind of game master, then there's not going to be a lot of tension in that scene. They're going to give up the ghost too easily. And the opposite is also true. If you're playing with a dick, then it's just going to be frustrating and you are going to fail because you didn't look under the correct piece of paper under some pillow on the floor or something. Right? So, there's a reason why perception checks were invented. But it might not have anything to do with investigating a room. It might have to do with passive perception. You and your group are slowly and stealthily creeping down a hallway, and something is following you. Some of the people in your group might have an opportunity to perceive that it's there. Right? How can we do this? We could use the surprise rule. Right? That's what the surprise rule is all about. But what if the thing that's following you doesn't attack and isn't interested in an attack, is simply following you? Then it's not actually surprising you. So why should we use the surprise rule? Is the surprise rule actually a notice rule? In other words, a perception check? We're now quite firmly in a gray area, and somebody has to make a ruling. We have a rule. How do we apply it? So even in the most tightly designed game, there are still situations where what the players want to do require you to adjudicate, require you to make a decision on how that rule will be applied, if that rule will be applied. Another thing that happens all the time is deciding when to roll. Right? There are lots of game masters out there who call for rolls too often, maybe under the theory that rolling is cool, so rolling more often will be more cool. But what they're really doing is inviting more failure. Now, failure can sometimes be funny, and that might be a positive reinforcement, like, haha, you totally screwed the pooch that time, let's keep rolling and see what other funny things can happen, which maybe prevents there ever being a serious game developing at all. Everything is slapstick and comedy. And that's fun. But you see what I'm saying? At some point, the game master has to step in and apply rules as written, or rulings over or in the absence of rules, raw or roar. And that is based on taste, and that is based on experience, and that is based on who you're playing with. So it's not a question really that ever goes away. When I first launched the Star Wars campaign with the group that I found here in Daejeon, we had a discussion. Right? I want to play this game exactly as written, right? And none of us have a lot of time for me to teach everyone the game. So what I want you to do is become a specialist in particular rules areas that apply to your character. I had to get everybody to agree to that. So I, as the game master, am trying to gain system mastery over the whole set of things, but I know there's going to be stuff I'm going to forget because each of the characters is so different, and they have these different talents they can draw upon. They have these different skills which apply in different areas, and on and on. So I want each person to feel like they're an expert about their character, and I'm going to figure out how to be an expert about the rules that don't relate to the characters first. And then together, we take charge of that game. And it's a very collaborative game. The way that the dice pool works invites us all to get involved as participants on every roll. So it lends itself very easily to that. If I were playing a different game, I might make a different decision. Like, I want to start this campaign in 2 months after I feel like I'm comfortable with the setting and I know how to balance your desires for character with what this game is good at doing. Right? I don't want you to bring in a character that is going to feel like a fish out of water all the time because you've got this cool character idea. It just has nothing to do with the game that we're playing, that kind of stuff. I might take it really slowly. We didn't want to take this game slowly. We wanted to dive right in. How do you do that? Get the players involved with learning it. So at every step, we are making rulings. Even playing raw, these things are connected. But for the last part of the question, we have should. What should I do? And you should do the thing that brings about the most enjoyment for the most people. Right? If people in your group want to experience Iron Falcon, it's my impression that what that means is they want to play that game as written. Some people say that. I want to play Vampire the Masquerade, or I want to play Ars Magica, or I want to play, I don't know, Call of Cthulhu. They're naming the game. And then other people say, I want to play in your game. And I felt that difference very strongly. I talk in my channel about a guy named Tom, and people wanted to play in Tom's game. They didn't care what Tom was running. They wanted to play in Tom's game. Right? So I don't know who you have around you. If you're considering this kind of question, should I play it raw, or should I, house rule it or homebrew it to my satisfaction, never having played it or after having played it? I think that depends on who you're playing with and when you're playing and why you're playing. Are you looking for a beer and pretzels kind of slapstick comedy game? Maybe you'll want to make adjustments so that's easier to produce. Are you going to play a very heavily dramatic game, but no one wants to learn a new system, so you're going to continue using the system you're comfortable with? You're going to have to make some adjustments if that game doesn't already support heavy drama. Are you looking for more role play? Find a system that supports role play, or find a way to tweak it. Whatever works for you. Now, my last point is, when I was still living in Seoul, we had 3 game masters, and then it became 2 game masters, and it eventually ended up just being me as people, finished their contracts and went home. All of our styles were different. We had a guy who was very big on player success. So for those of us who liked risk versus reward, there was a lack of satisfaction. There was a guy who liked to tweak everything. Nothing could be left alone. Everything needed to be tweaked, and nothing could be experienced first to see if that tweak was necessary. The tweaks were very clever. The games played very well. But I never, ever, when I was a player, got to play the game as written. Ever. And so then I had to figure out a way to run it myself to get a sense of what that game actually feels like as intended. So who do you have in your group? Are they like me? Do they want to experience the game, making adjustments as needed? Or do they have an idea in their mind that they want to enact first, and they're looking for a system that will come as close as it can to that idea and then go with it? Right? We're going to meet all kinds as we continue on through our lives and our groups expand and contract. So I don't think you ever escape from rules as written and rulings over, or in the absence of rules, raw and roar. But that's part of what makes the journey so much fun. If you've never tried that leap of faith, go for it. Pick up an OSR game or pick up an old game that doesn't have the full and bountiful support of all the rules you're used to in a modern game. Go for it. Throw yourself out into the abyss and see what awesome land of adventure and wonderment you land in. Likewise, if you've always homebrewed and never explored a system which at least tries to give you as complete a framework as possible, go for that, because you're going to be able to run it so sweetly, and the players are going to thrill to it. So, Jason, I'm glad you're back. Awesome video. I hope this in some way contributes to the discussion that you've started.